It's me, TheRizardon, aka Riz, and welcome to my series, My Time With, where I talk about various forms of media that I grew up with or experienced somewhat recently that I spent a lot of time with. Just to be clear, the goal of this is not to provide any type of formal review, but to share my thoughts and opinions on what I've experienced while playing, watching, or listening to whatever I'm covering. Finally, I will add that creating a video on something is my 100% recommendation to at least give it a try because these take a lot of time to play, watch, write, and record. Now let's get into my time with The Legend of Zelda Twilight Princess. The Legend of Zelda Twilight Princess is the 12th installment in the Zelda series that was released in 2006 for Nintendo's GameCube and the Wii. I have no intention of providing a complete insight on the development of Twilight Princess, so in a nutshell, when Twilight Princess was in development, it was already under a lot of pressure after the lukewarm response that the Wind Waker had received. The people didn't want cartoony Link, they wanted something dark and serious, which was the trend at the time. They got what they wanted, and people were actually mostly happy with it. How often does that happen? Regardless of how people felt about this game now or in the past, the sales numbers did all the talking. Twilight Princess was the highest grossing Zelda game for about 12 years up until Breath of the Wild was released in 2017 and then surpassed these sales numbers in 2018. It's really impressive how long it held this title, as there were actually 4 new Zelda games that released between Twilight Princess and Breath of the Wild. Those being Phantom Hourglass in 2007, Spirit Tracks in 2009, Skyward Sword in 2011, A Link Between Worlds in 2013, and Triforce Heroes in 2015. Honorable mentions to the remasters of Ocarina of Time, Wind Waker, Majora's Mask, and there was also a Twilight Princess remaster as well. There was a lot of Zelda going on in the 2010s, is my point. As for my own history with Twilight Princess, I was only around 7 when this game first came out, and I wouldn't get it until much later during Christmas of 2011 when the Nintendo Selects Edition came out for the Wii. Before I actually got my hands on this, I was completely content with watching the E3 reveal, watching Let's Plays, listening to the music, and playing older Zelda games. I think around this time I had already played Ocarina of Time, A Link to the Past, and the 4 Game Boy Advance games. I was very much in love with this game before I ever even got to play it for myself, thanks to all these factors. Luckily for me, this obsession with Twilight Princess did not end in disappointment, as I consider this game not only one of my favorite Zelda titles, but one of my favorite games in general. I played through this game twice recently after not playing it for a couple of years, playing the GameCube version. I played it once last year during my livestream event that I had over on my Twitch called Road to the Kingdom, where I played 3 of my favorite Zelda games up to the release of Tears of the Kingdom. Then I played it again over these past about 3 months starting in April, just to make sure my mind was fresh off this game for this video. Upon starting the game, we get to see the beautiful Faron Spring as dusk falls and the warm, dimming light of the sun is going down. Instead of music, there's a peaceful ambiance created by the small waves, waterfalls, and birds that sets the mood for the heart-to-heart Link is having with Russell. Now, Russell is a father, not just a figure for Link, but he is literally a dad with another kid on the way. He's a swordsman, the protector of Ordon Village, and is shown to be a wise and caring man. Russell is talking with Link about how this time of day always makes him feel a strange sadness. He says that they say that the twilight hour is the only time when our world intersects with the spirit world, that it allows us to feel the lingering regrets of spirits who have passed on, and that's why a feeling of loneliness can be felt in the air. Moving on from this somber topic, Russell asks Link to do him a favor. In 2 days, make a delivery to the royal family of Hyrule in his place. Now, Link has never been to Hyrule proper, so it'd be a great opportunity for him to go out and not just see the castle town, but the world. Afterwards, the two decide it's time to head home for the evening and retreat to more beautiful scenery of the surrounding forests as the music begins to pick up a little. It's a slow, comforting song, letting us know that it really is time to turn in for the night. Russell parts ways with Link at Link's house, where Russell's wife and child are waiting to meet up with him. They say their farewells as Russell's son looks back at Link with admiration. What a nice way to end the night, right? Wrong. Before Link's head can even hit the pillow, some goofy dude comes in front of the house yelling, talking about some, "Hey!" because he needs help herding goats. Also, some girl named Ilya has taken our horse. She's a horse girl, but not the weird kind, I swear. He tells us to take good care of her as we head back to the village, her being our horse, Epona. I've always felt that Ilya and Link have some romantic tension throughout the game, but they're both teenagers who are just too awkward to say anything outright. We make our way through the village toward the ranch to assist with goat herding while having passing conversations with the other villagers. The herding is the first minigame and first thing we get to do in the game as far as important tasks go. It's also a nice subtle way to teach the horse riding mechanics of the game, as you have to ride around the ranch to gather the goats, then dash over gates and hurdles to exit the area if you really want to end the day and go to bed. So, after probably a full night's sleep, Link is woken up by 3 of the 4 village children early on his day off. They don't even really want anything either. They're just telling him that there's a slingshot on sale, they're broke, and heavy-handedly hint that he should go buy this slingshot for 30 whole rupees. We go scrounge around for rupees, get a fishing rod that one of the children Colin made, catch a fish, feed a cat, get a bottle with some leftover milk, recover a stolen baby cradle, knock down a beehive, stop an escaping goat, and eventually buy the slingshot. Link is a busy man, but he helps out the village with a smile on his face, and the adults are all grateful to have him around. Returning to the other 3 children, Tallow, Mallow, and Beth, to show off his adult money purchase. We also see Russell again, and he gives us a wooden sword. This fully equips us to begin our combat tutorial disguised in an athletic performance for the kids. It's pretty fun as we get to see the personalities of the kids and how they interact. I compared the trio to Ed, Edd and Eddy, featuring Colin as the outsider, as the other kids don't really think too much of him. Our exhibition is interrupted by one of the monkeys that have apparently been causing trouble around the village. Thinking that he's nice like Link, Tallow chases after the monkey, armed with only a stick and confidence. Of course, in video game fashion, now we have to chase after his dumbass. This gives us the opportunity to explore some more of the Ordon Woods, at least. Here we encounter a young black entrepreneur who sells lantern oil and gives away lanterns as a part of his marketing. As far as I know though, he only does business in the forest, so I can't imagine business is booming. Oh well. We get a lantern, go through a small cave, and emerge towards the end of the forest where we save a captured Tallow and monkey from some bokoblins. Ironic that he was trapped in the same cage as the monkey he was trying to attack. Black comes at you real fast, young Tallow. Anyway, on the way home, Tallow begs us to not tell his parents before he runs off back home. Then we run into Russell, where he praises and apologizes to Link for taking initiative in saving the kid and the fact that he had to do it in place of him. Also, he asks Link if he noticed how weird the woods have been feeling lately. Definitely foreshadowing that it's about to go down, eventually. Interrupting himself, Russell reminds Link that tomorrow is the day he will leave for Hyrule to make the offering to the royal family. The next day comes. Link helps out at the ranch again before he gets ready to head out on his journey. On his way through the village, Ilia notices that Epona is hurt. She scolds Link and her father, the mayor, by association, then takes Epona back to the spring to mend her wounds and clean her up again. Horse girls. We team up with young Colin to retrieve our horse, but Ilia refuses to let us in and has locked in the gate. I don't know who she thinks she is, but Colin has Link's back and directs him towards a secret tunnel to get into the spring. While Link is busy rolling around in dirt, Colin vouches for us and explains why Epona is hurt, because of the rescue mission that Link went on yesterday. All seems well when suddenly we're ambushed by bokoblins. Bulbins, they're on boards. They shoot Ilia in the back with an arrow. They knock Link upside the head, and they knock out Colin too. It's a massacre. After quickly taking all 3 of the kids out, their big boss of the Bulbins takes a look at the spring, noticing something significant about it. Then he blows a horn, summoning a dark portal in the sky. Link awakens sometime later and speeds off towards this strange massive barrier blocking further entry into the forest. Before he can even comprehend what it is, he gets snatched up by some dark beast. As he's strangled, the Triforce on his hand begins to glow, saving him and turning him into a beast so that he can exist in this new dimension. This traumatic transformation makes Link pass out and the enemy comes back to drag him away. Like, literally dragging him away. The scene zooms out to show us the back of someone's head as they watch on, having seen the entire interaction. Now, I'd say that we're a little over halfway through the opening act of the game, with this point being the last part of introducing us to the first half of Link's gameplay loop, characteristics, and how people around him view him as a smart, responsible, strong, and capable person. I think it's important to go in depth with running this back for all of you because it'll help better understand the events and actions for the rest of the game and connect back into Link's eventual status as the Hero of Twilight. He is not reluctant and is willing to undergo a lot on his own to do what he believes is right to protect his village, friends, and even the world. Back to the story, Link awakens in chains and behind bars. A little redundant, but whatever. After trying to break free, we meet our new ally, Midna. She's an imp with a big helmet. She loves doing bad things with her friends and getting her way. After teasing Link, she frees him from his chains with a small blast. She asks him if he knows where he is, and says that if he can escape the cell, she might tell him. But after digging under the bars to almost freedom, she laughs at us, mounts us, and doesn't even tell us where we are. We just have to do what she says and escape. All we know is that we're in a dungeon waterway. It's ominous, people have been turned into spirits, and there are black squares in the atmosphere that signal that we are in a strange place. After some brief puzzles and platforming, we finally exit this underground path and make it outside to the roof, where it is revealed that we are in fact at Hyrule Castle. Too bad we didn't bring the sword we were supposed to deliver. On the roof, we encounter some screaming bird-like enemies called Shadow Kargaroks that are really loud and used to scare me a lot as a kid. Link and Midna continue onward to meet this person she kept mentioning that she wanted us to meet. Apparently they've been searching for us. This person is a tall, cloaked figure, showing nothing but a small glimpse of their face. They inform us that the kingdom is under attack by the King of Darkness and has trapped the entire castle town in Twilight. Here, we see a cutscene of the initial assaults. The soldiers are losing badly, and a weirdo makes his way up to the throne of Princess Zelda. Speaks briefly, saying, "Surrender or die," and "life or death." It's very dramatic. Here, the princess surrenders, and the town is then encased in twilight. If you didn't get it by now, the person telling us this story is the Princess Zelda herself. Midna and Zelda seem to already have a bit of cordial relationship, with Midna maintaining her demeanor of not really caring much for the normal world because of Twilight is her world. Zelda tells them that they must leave now since the guard is coming, so the duo promptly do just that and get up out of there. Midna says that a promise is a promise and that she can send Link home, but taunts him into continued servitude by horrifyingly turning into a screaming Colin in Iliad. Regardless, she sends Link back to Ordon Spring, still in his wolf form and now lingering in his literal shadow. Midna tasks us with getting a sword and shield for her to use before we go back into the Wall of Twilight. This takes us back to Ordon Village, where we go on a sneaking mission to steal the Ordon shield and the Ordon sword. I'm going to interject again to explain the other half of the gameplay loop based around Link's wolf form. Throughout the game, I would say that there are three main things that you accomplish as Wolf Link. Recovering the Tears of Light to revive the light spirits, defeat Twilight Beasts to obtain new fast travel areas, and some form of quest that you have to complete to reach new areas or assist someone. Wolf Link controls very similarly to regular Link. I think I would say that the controls are actually a little bit tighter when it comes to turning though. Combat is pretty similar. You have an AoE attack that allows you to target multiple enemies in a row. You have basic slash-like attacks and a jump attack that lets you latch onto some enemies and bite them repeatedly. It may seem brief, but this makes up a decent chunk of the game. Back to the quests, we go ahead and head toward the Twilight where Midna dramatically snatches Link into it. She just loves theatrics, scaring Link and just generally being extra. We go ahead and collect all 16 tears as we retrace our steps towards the end of the forest. Once we collect all the Tears of Light, we automatically get thrown into a cutscene where Farron is revived. Farron kind of looks like a monkey wolf creature with a very human-like face. It'd be creepy if it wasn't on our side, to be honest. The veil of twilight over the area has been destroyed, turning the forest back to normal, which allows us as Link in our regular form with some traditional new threads to appear. Link is praised and warned that a dark power is lurking within the forest temple. It's the power of darkness that the spirits had once sealed away. Conveniently for Midna, she's looking for this power for herself, and we're kind of stuck working with her if we want to save the other village kids in the world. Ready to go about playing the rest of the game. I know this opening act is super long when I talk about it, but during playtime, this only takes up about 3 hours, depending on how fast you play. It does a great job of giving you some world history, setting up the second act, showing gameplay mechanics, and putting you in kind of a flow state to take on the rest of the challenges ahead. After so many playthroughs, it's only natural that I pick up on way more things each time around, but I think in general, it's one of the strongest openings in the series. Before heading towards the Forest Temple, I like to go back to the village to talk to some of the adults and get a little bit more context as to what's going on. Everyone's relieved to see Link and surprised to see him with a sword and shield that he stole as a wolf. They just assume that he defeated the wolf and they don't really ask questions about it or his new outfit. We also get to visit Uli and Russell as she's tending to his wounds. She has a brief conversation with Link, asking him to save the children and to return to her safely. Now, if Russell is basically Link's dad, then Uli is definitely like a mother to him. which makes this conversation a little touching since she has to let one child go off into danger to potentially save the others. This game has heart. After catching up with everyone, Link and Midna go ahead through the woods until we reach a part of them that now suddenly has poison mist everywhere that we cannot pass on our own. With expert timing, the same monkey that we saved earlier snatches our lantern to clear the mist and guide us through. Our first escort mission, essentially. Our success is rewarded by an encounter with the Golden Wolf, who takes the form of a shade. They were once a legendary hero, but no one remembers them that way, unfortunately. And this is actually the Link from Ocarina of Time and Majora's Mask. I think that this is the only instance where two Links are related to each other. Regardless, his goal is to pass on his combat knowledge to teach us new skills. After this, he will only appear if you find Howling Stones, where you place some nostalgic Zelda music in your wolf form. These are located throughout the world. Once Link is done zoning out, we're able to enter into the forest temple proper after burning away some massive spider webs, defeating a couple of enemies, and climbing some vines. Once inside, we freed our monkey friend, who I guess got captured while we were zoned out. You think she'd learn how to not get caught at this point. The actual temple is designed pretty well. Everything operates via wooden mechanisms activated by wind or lighting lanterns to allow things to turn, rise, or go lower. The goal here is to also save all the captured monkeys so that we can make a big monkey chain and swing towards the dungeon boss area. In traditional fashion, there are keys, maps, compasses, and chests to obtain in the dungeon. 2 of the chests have pieces of heart in them. This trend continues throughout the rest of the game in the remaining 7 dungeons too. This was something new that I had to get used to in my first playthrough because no other Zelda game has done it like this to my knowledge. Eventually we come across a bridge that gets destroyed by a big baboon with a big red ass, and I'm not exaggerating at all on that. He has a boomerang and I definitely want it, so of course we track him down, defeat him, and the evil bug that was making him do bad things, and get rewarded with the Gale Boomerang. It's not as bad as far as first dungeon items go. It can lock onto multiple targets and carry a variety of items back to you or other targets. This comes in handy as it's required to get through the rest of the dungeon, save all the monkeys, gather all the collectibles, and fight the dungeon boss. Another dungeon item we can find in a less traditional sense is Uku. She's a weird alien-looking chicken-bodied something that can warp us back to the entrance of the temple. I've never really taken advantage of her help, so she's just chilling with us up until we finish the dungeon. After a bit of goofing around, gathering monkeys, and the boss room key, we assemble the super ultra fighting monkey chain and swing across to begin our battle versus Darkness, aka the Twilight Parasite Diababa. This fight is pretty easy as you just have to use what you've learned with the Gale Boomerang to guide bombs into the plant creature's mouth. After defeating the 2 heads, the second phase kicks in and a third larger head appears with a weird eyeball in its mouth. The same tactic works thanks to our new baboon friend, who was the former mini-boss, bringing us some bombing enemies to throw at the boss. After a couple of bombs and a bunch of jump attacks, the boss is defeated and withers away. Its eyeball falls out and turns into an entire heart container too. After the theatrics, the temple and the forest area are purified from the effects of the creature and its dark power. This fused shadow is exactly what Midna has been looking for. Whenever I defeat a boss, I like to take a look at the scenery of the chamber. This game in general has aged very well to me, and it's pretty to look at. Once we collect our heart container, fuse shadow, we teleport on out, with Midna back to the Spirit Spring. Pharaoh tells us, "Hey man, it ain't sweet out here just yet. Go east and see my guy Eldon. He needs some help too." So 1 fuse shadow down, 1 spirit save, and 2 more to go. Let's get it. Following the spirit's advice, we exit the Faron Woods and into the large overworld of Hyrule. We're greeted with a triumphant, booming theme that is Hyrule Field. We also get a short overview shot of some of the surrounding features. Very cool. After sightseeing and running into a mailman, we head towards the next wall of Twilight. As usual, our mischievous companion, Midna, is taunting us with her preference for her home dimension of Twilight. Completely uncalled for, to be honest. Going forward, we come across our old broken sword, which has the scent of the kids from Ordon Village. This is the tracking mechanic of the game, and we'll be doing it a couple more times too. Essentially, we collect a scent, and then we follow a colored trail to our goal. During our tracking, we come across a path that very obviously needs a bridge to be crossed. Luckily, we know that the bridge was somehow transported to Faron Woods. There are also a couple of times where we'll be doing this. Teleport to something to bring it somewhere else to continue our quest. I always thought it was pretty cool. After the minor inconvenience, we arrive at our goal, Kakariko Village. We're greeted with some Twilight beasts so that we can get our obligatory fast travel spot. Then we speak with the third Spirit of Light, Eldon, who needs an assist. We get another rundown of what we need to do and get our lights tier sack back. Throughout the search, we get to explore some of the houses, accidentally cause arson while trying to take some bugs out, visit some Gorons, finding Howland's Dome, and most importantly, we find the kids. The village kids are being kept safe by a man named Renato, his daughter Luda, and the village coward Barnes. It was his house we arsoned, by the way. These three are suggested to be the only survivors of the village due to the Twilight Beasts apparently killing a majority of the villagers while they tried to defend themselves from an attack. We learn this from Barnes because he's being pessimistic and breaking down Renato's hopeful and comforting words to the children. After being shut up, the only person that seems to really believe in us is young Colin, who has complete faith in us rescuing them. They should have a bet on it, because after this, we defeat the last bugs and we restore the light spirit Eldon. It's another larger-than-life creature cloaked in a white light with the form of an owl/manta ray. It has an eerie hooting sound to it too. We get a thank you and some info on where the next Fuse shadow is, the Goron Mountains. Before continuing, Link reunited with the children and meets the Kakariko survivors. Renato happens to be friends with the mayor of Ordon Village, Bo, so the kids are safe here for the time being. We can't quite continue directly to Goron Mountain because they have some type of grudge against humans at the moment, and we don't have the current means to go toe-to-toe with the Goron. Renato lets us know that Mayor Bo does, though. So off to home we return. It's like, you thought we had to make that journey back on foot? Nah. In comes Epona, squeaking and running from some enemies. After a brief raining minigame, we recover our horse companion and journey home, for real this time. Upon our return, we meet up with the mayor, tell him the unfortunate news that his daughter, Ilya, is still missing, and that we need to beat up some Gorons. He's surprisingly level-headed about the whole situation and continues on to test our strength via a sumo battle. So after throwing him around for a little bit, we obtain the secret item that allows a regular human to defeat a Goron. Iron boots to keep us grounded and cheap. After being sworn to secrecy, we are now equipped to make our trek up the mountain. On the way back into Kakariko Village though, we get a cutscene of the same goons that attacked us back in Ordon Forest stampeding through the village, almost running over Beth until Colin saves her by shoving her out of the way. He's locked in and taking the first steps to get like Link, truly. After this unfortunate event, the enemies kidnap Colin again, and we pursue them. Link is visibly pissed off and ready to make some critical happen. The pursuit turns into a field battle where we have to chase down the boss man that has the child while evading and defeating his minions until we can eventually approach the boss himself, slash away his armor, and then after this, we have an intense bridge battle, which is essentially a duel to see who can knock who off the bridge first, like a joust. I always struggle a bit with this fight, but you just have to maneuver around his bull and slash him a couple of times to win. After victory, we get a brief scene of Link and Epona basking in the victory over this evildoer, which I think is one of the most iconic scenes in the game. We return back to the village of Colin, listen to him talk about the thought process during the attack before he passes out, and watch as he begins his transformation from being a cowardly child to a brave one. The other children also recognize this and actually start to treat him much better. It's some good character growth all around. Now that everyone is settled for now, we can buy the legendary Hylian shield from the newly opened Mallow Mart and be on our way. It's not a good idea having a wooden shield near a fiery volcano literally called Death Mountain anyway. The path remains unchanged for the most part on the journey through and upwards towards where the Goron chief is supposed to be. While fighting Gorons and using them as platforms to launch ourselves higher, a big-ass piece of volcanic debris crashes into the ground. This is a surprise tool that we will use for later. Anyway, once in the Goron chamber, before we get mauled by like 8 Gorons, one of the elders stops them. He challenges us to a sumo match for information and entrance into the Goron mine. This playthrough I struggled a little bit, but I eventually slapped him around and tossed him out the ring with the help of our very obvious iron boots. The elder, Gorkoron, tells us that the chief, Darbus, was possessed by a darkness and had to be sealed within the mines by himself and the other 3 elders. They have a super secret treasure within the mines as well that we're searching for too. Essentially, the goal is to find the dungeon treasure, find the three elders, collect the three shards of the boss key from them, and save Darbus, patriarch of the Goron family. Let's do this. Off the bat, the dungeon's first room gives us a decent idea of what's to come. Of course, it is a mine, it's literally in the name, and it is inside of an active volcano. The floor is very much lava, there's a lot of metal platforms, ladders, fences, magnetized floors, and switches too. The music for this dungeon fits very well. It has an industrial sound to it. I like to imagine that the beat mimics the sound of mining minerals or whatever the Goron are actually gathering from here. It's repetitive but subtle enough to kind of fade into the background as you continue through the dungeon. This dungeon is another one that is straightforward. As usual, just going to rooms that you have not been to previously will usually lead you in the right direction. There aren't many keys or items to collect in general. The only things of importance in regular chests are 2 more heart pieces that you can find. Then, of course, the dungeon item, the hero's bow, which is the reward for defeating the mini-boss, Dangoro. This fight is essentially a supersized version of fighting the regular Gorons on our journey up towards the temple from Death Mountain. We have to utilize the iron boots to stick to the magnetized floor so that we can attack Dangoro's belly, get him to turn into a ball, and toss him into the lava. Sounds simple, but the difficulty comes from your positioning, because sometimes if you aren't close enough to the edge of the platform, he will not fall into the lava. Also, we can fall into the lava if we take our boots off because the platform tilts. After his defeat, he commends us for our strength and says that we can have their treasure, the bow, but in exchange we have to save Darbus. We were going to do all this anyway, so it really was not his idea, and we aren't doing it for him specifically in the first place. That might just be some of that Midna rubbing off on me. Anyway, with bow in hand, we're able to defeat some Beamos, which are like your grandparents' dresser with a laser eyeball on it, by shooting it in the eye. We can also shoot down ropes and out of reach switches to continue forward. A lot of this dungeon, after obtaining the bow, is shooting stuff down and walking very slowly on the magnetized floors. Sometimes the sound of the clanking from the boots can grate on my ears, but it's over quickly enough. You can just turn the volume down. After some archery battles in the last 2 rooms of the dungeon, we arrive at the boss door. The giant lock mechanism spins and falls to the ground as we open it. Link enters into a silent, dark room, and we see a giant chained beast that is the darkest shade of black you've ever seen. Kind of like Akon. A gem on his forehead begins to glow, and the beast roars and combusts. It breaks its chains off of the floor and ceiling. This is the Twilight Igniter, Virus. There's no time to think or take anything in because Link is getting charged down. Luckily, I already know how to beat this guy. We must carefully aim our bow at the gem on its forehead to cause him to go a little crazy. Then we take advantage of this distraction by grabbing the chains around his ankles, equipping our iron boots to stick to the floor, and then pulling him down. Once down, we can spin attack, jump slash, stab, and slice that gem until Virus is defeated and Darbus is freed from the darkness of the fused shadow. Good job, team. Our reward is an entire heart container and some information from Midna on our shared enemy, Zant, the King of Darkness. Zant is strong, but Midna very passionately denies his kingship. She also does not have much respect for his power, or that of Zelda's while she's at it. She thinks it's irresponsible for someone so young to be in charge of so much. She does not hold this against Zelda though, and truly does not wish her harm because she had no choice in her role. She digresses and states that she'll be aight once we get all the fused shadows. We speak to the chief, and he doesn't even know what's going on besides his head hurting. My bad, man. Once we teleport out of the dungeon, the light spirit guides us to go north to the Lanayru spirit. The current residents are also nearby to greet us. Colin has recovered from his injuries and tells us about Ilya and how they took her somewhere else. He reassures Link that he is fine and that he doesn't have to worry about him anymore. Link proudly smiles at him and remembers back to the beginning of the game when Colin said he'd grow up to be just like us. Ronaldo reassures us that the children are safe here and continues on our journey. I really love this cutscene because we have Ilya's theme playing in the background. It's the soothing sound of the spirit spring as well that really brings it together. It fits well as Link is the one being comforted, like how Ilya would comfort him or Epona back in the village. It's also reminiscent of the first 2 cutscenes we had previously featuring her in the Ordon Spring. As we end our time with Kakariko Village and Death Mountain, if you take the time to interact with the residents, you can see the restoration of the relationship between the humans and the Gorons. There are two general shops, one open in the morning and one open at night. Tallow stands watch alongside a Goron to help warn of any danger, and Tallow is doing this because he was inspired by Colin's initiative. Lastly, the bomb shop is now back in business, and we can get our first bomb bag. A lot of heart pieces become available after this point, so I did take the time to do a little item cleanup. But this isn't a play-by-play guide, so you'll just have to explore for yourself. Next up, we'll be adventuring up north. The first part of our northern journey is familiar. It's the area where we just had that duel with the King Bulbin, who's been making our lives so hard this entire game. Once we cross the bridge of Eldon, it gets stolen and teleported away. You can't have nothing nice in Hyrule, I swear. After the bridge, we're at our last area of Twilight for the rest of the game. If you're unfamiliar with how Zelda games usually go, the last thing of a section is usually the longest part of it. So get ready. Upon entering the Twilight, we come across another scent. This time, it's Ilia's. Tracking it leads us into the Hyrule Castle town itself. Here, a lot of the residents seem to be going about their days as normal. There are still music performers, people shopping, and old ladies gossiping. It seems that the town has been relatively safe throughout the events of the game, despite being the closest to where Princess Zelda is imprisoned. Continuing to follow the trail, we find Ilia in a bar with an injured Zora child, the owner of the bar, and some cowardly Hylian soldiers. It seems that Ilia has saved this poor Zora from some monsters and brought him to the bar to get help. Unfortunately, the local doctor does not know much about helping Zora. It is mentioned, however, that a man named Renato in Kakariko has experience helping Zora, humans, and Gorons. Good thing we know that guy, but there isn't anything we can do at this point because we are very much still in the Twilight. Continuing our eavesdropping, we overhear the Hylian soldiers discussing plans to investigate the sudden loss of water in Lake Hylia, the land's main water supply. They're too slow and scared to take action themselves, so we head on our way to the lake. It's not too far from the castle town, but it can never be that easy. Upon trying to cross the bridge, Link and Midna notice that the bridge smells kind of funny. It looks kind of funny, and it's kind of oily. Just before they can hurry off, an archer Bulbin appears and ignites the bridge at both ends, forcing the duo to jump off the bridge into the shallow lake below. This is where we need to be, but the water level is preventing us from meeting with the Lanayru spirit. After listening to the Zora, we learn that there is something going on at the Zora's domain that has stopped the water. If we listen to another person down here, an eccentric business owner, he conveniently points us in the direction of an enemy. Now, this enemy is one of those giant twilight birds that make that scary noise, and he mounts it. Once you take care of the nuisance, Midna takes control of the creature, and we force it to fly us up to Zora's domain. I always thought this was a pretty cool / subtle way to introduce a minigame. Once we land closer to the top, the issue is obvious. The water is frozen somehow. After some brief platforming to the domain proper, we also discover that there are Zora frozen within the water. Luckily, we have a surprise tool that we save for this exact moment, that giant piece of Death Mountain. Once we teleport it to the area, it restores life to the Zora and the flow to the water. Before leaving to go visit the spirit, the queen of the Zora, Rutella, appears before us. She tells us that the plight of her people, that they were attacked by the Twilight Beasts and she was executed in front of her people to set an example. Luckily, she was able to send her son, Prince Rallis, out of the domain to alert the castle town for assistance, but he too was attacked. At least he got rescued, but he has no idea what has happened to his people or to his mother. Zora are going to need a lot of therapy once they can get situated because the royal execution is insane. I remember being shocked learning about this for the first time. They're just straight up killing people in this game. It can get pretty grim. Anyway, Rutella asks us to help her son. In exchange, she will award us with the protection of water. It is a water tunic that allows us to swim like a Zora and breathe underwater. I wanted it anyway, but gifts and items are good motivators. Continuing downstream, we land right in front of the Spirit Spring, speak with the Lanayru spirit, and begin the long journey for the Tears of Light. They went all out with this collection quest because we have to go back to the castle town for one, do that flying mini game for a couple of them, go back to Zora's domain, and also fight a giant shadow insect, the Twilight Bloat, to collect all the tears. It's pretty easy as I've done it a lot, but as far as first playthroughs, it might be a bit tedious with all the areas you need to go to especially if you don't know a correct order to do it in. Once the light spirit Lanayru awakens, we get our usual speech of, "Hey man, this dark power you're seeking is dangerous." But Lanayru goes a step further and keeps going, like, "No, for real, this shit is bad news. Watch this cutscene I made using your likeness and Ilya's likeness to really drive the point that back in the day, the situation made people turn on each other that bad. Essentially, it was the will of the goddess that the fused shadows be broken apart and sealed away. What had happened was the three goddesses came down and created life and granted power to everyone equally. Everyone lived in harmony under their guidance and protection until people learned of a sacred realm, where the Triforce is and I think where the goddesses are. That last part is never really clear. During the chaos, dark interlopers appeared with extremely powerful magic to obtain all of this for themselves. This is when the goddesses ordered the three light spirits, Lanayru, Pharaon, and Eldon, to handle business. I guess Pharaon wasn't born just yet, or maybe some lesser light spirit. I don't know. The end. The cutscene is another one of my favorites in the series. It fits more towards the creepy parts of the series in general, and makes sure that we really understand the stakes of what we are doing, and it gives us a visual of Link actually processing and understanding what is going on. The visuals of the scene are great, and the whiting out of Link and Ilya's eyes to show the malice are perfect. I really enjoy stuff like this. We're not playing at hero anymore, and things are about to get much more serious. We just have one major thing left to do: return to Castletown and help out Rallis. Once we get back to the bar, Link is happy to see Ilya again, but it seems she has amnesia from the attacks on her life. She doesn't remember Link one bit, unfortunately. We also properly meet Telma, owner of the bar, and some nice black representation in the game. Her braids are even accurate. They had this figured out in 2006, and there are still development teams that act like it's too hard to do in 2024. But that's besides the point. Telma lays out the terms of the mission. We have to travel by horse and carriage to Kakariko Village to get these two some medical attention. Since the Bridge of Eldon has been spirited away, we will have to go the long route via the Bridge of Hylia. On the way, we must defeat the King Bulbin again and defend the carriage from the regular Bulbins who will try to set it on fire. As we go over the plans, comedically, the Hylian soldiers sneak out one by one because they are cowards. We got it though. It's a pretty straightforward escort mission that allows us to utilize our boomerang for putting out fires, our sword, and our brand new bow. Once in Kakariko, Renato takes the young prince into his care. He's recovering, but is consumed with the fate of his mother. Unfortunately, we will have to tell him the bad news. Our boy Colin has it covered and is going to help keep watch over him until he's better. Ilya, however, will take some time before she will regain her memory. Everyone is completely safe now, at least. We speak with Telma for a bit as she stares down Renato with bedroom eyes before going off to holler at him. I guess life goes on. Speaking of going on, Zora Queen Rutella leads us towards our reward that is kept safe in an old Kakariko graveyard, which hides the secret resting place for Zora royalty. She reminisces about her long past husband, who created the Zora armor we've received, and speaks lovingly of her son. She has complete confidence that he will be brave and lead the Zora in her stead. It's a somber moment that gets interrupted by Midna being rude and telling us to hurry to the dungeon for the fused shadow. She's so impatient. Once we return to Hylia Lake, we're able to sink down with our new threads equipped and enter the Lakebed Temple. A lot of people get scared at the idea of a Zelda water temple, but this one is nothing to be afraid of. Of the three we've done so far, this one may take a little more time to complete, but that's due to the layout, not difficulty. Again, we're treated to some more ambient music. The dungeon has an echo to all sound effects, which adds to the feeling of it being a forgotten area. There's a ton of water rushing in almost every location, and if there isn't yet, there will be soon, because the main puzzle in this dungeon is opening two floodgates that bring in water to power multiple passages. The platforming is minor, there isn't too much combat, it really feels more like an exploration dungeon if anything. The enemy variety here isn't anything exciting, the most unique being the Toto, Skullfish, Bari, and the Shellblade, which are all water-based enemies. Eventually we make it to the mini-boss, Deku Toad. It's a giant toad that spawns the Toto to attack us and jumps high in an attempt to flatten us. Simply dodging out of the way and slashing up its tongue is enough to defeat it. Then we are rewarded with the dungeon item, the hook shot. It's one of my favorite items in any game, period. It's just something about a hook shot, man. I just can't get enough. After shooting ourselves around, we stumble upon the boss key and are able to enter the boss door, which is located at the bottom of the central area of the dungeon. Let's backflip on down and get to it. The boss, Morpheal, has two phases. Both are pretty easy. First, we must hookshot an eyeball and cut it up. Once it's had enough of that, the mouth and tendrils come out of the sand and reveal that Morpheal is actually a giant eel. Who would have guessed? I definitely didn't think it was in the name. The fight is still pretty much the same though. All we have to do is swim after it and hookshot to its eye to cut it up some more. Do this about 3 or 4 times and it's defeated. Pretty underwhelming dungeon to me, but a win is a win. We've gathered all the fused shadows, collected another heart container, and are ready to head back out into the world. Before heading out, we have a nice conversation with Midna, and she actually apologized to us for having to drag us around the world doing this for her. We're teleported directly into the Hylia Spirit Spring. Water's still in our ears, but we continue on. Link turns around to exit the spring and bumps into Zant himself. He towers over Link and begins his ambush. Lanayru tries to come to our rescue using its light powers to vanquish Zant, but it does not affect him at all. He places the area into twilight yet again, turning us back into a wolf, and he attacks Midna, stealing our fused shadows. All of this without moving a muscle, mind you. He tells Midna that his power is of a different source than their people's ancient magic, granted to him by his god. Link lunges at Zant in his wolf form, but is dealt with once again as an orange and black shard seeps into his head. Zant menacingly removes his mouth guard and reveals his mouth and his hot ass breath, while trying to persuade Midna to join him in his conquest over the realm of light. In anger at her decline in joining him, he throws Midna over the spirit spring and returns the area to the world of light, causing fatal injury to Midna. Lanayru teleports Link and Midna away from the area and tells us to hurry to Princess Zelda because she holds the key to releasing us from our wolf form. We have now arrived at one of my favorite sequences. We have an injured and defeated Midna. Link is trapped in his beast form. He wants to help Midna, and the one person that can do anything is locked away. It's a desperate time for both the protagonists, and the music that plays for the entirety is Midna's Lament. It's essentially a remix of the regular Hyrule Fields theme, with added urgency and a sound that's soothing yet urgent. It's beautiful. It's definitely one of my favorite Zelda songs in general. Throughout our rescue mission, we traverse back through Castle Town and go into a secret entrance in Telma's bar that can direct us into the castle. Following the path brings us back to that familiar sewer area where we are at the beginning of the game. Once at the top, Midna collapses off of our back and Zelda comes to our aid. Midna has no concern for herself, only for us, and urges Zelda to help Link return to his true form because he's the hero that the world needs. The princess directs Link towards the sacred grove in Faron Woods to collect the Sword of Evil's Bane, the Master Sword. Midna, feeling her life coming to an end, asks Link if he can make it to the forest on his own, and for the princess to tell Link where the Mirror of Twilight is located. Zelda, dodging the question, commends Midna for thinking only of them and their world, despite the issue being the fault of the Realm of Light. In a show of appreciation, she gives her life force to Midna, restoring her to full health and causing herself to vanish into thin air. The duo leave the castle, not wasting any time that the princess has gifted them, and head to the sacred grove. Before leaving, we see the castle become encased in twilight, to the anger of Midna and Link. It's getting pretty intense. With the ability to teleport to the woods, it takes no time at all to arrive where we need to be. We even save our monkey friend, again, from some giant wooden puppets that are harassing her. She tells us that they came from the sacred grove and points us in the right direction. Entering the area, we're giving a beautiful overview of the forest while a rendition of the Lost Woods theme from Ocarina of Time plays. This time as the theme of the sacred grove. Along with the aesthetic of the area and knowing what it protects, the music adds to a kind of mystical vibe. We get to learn another song, which happens to be Zelda's Lullaby, and continue forward. We end up meeting the person who is creating these puppets too, a Skull Kid. He taunts us and makes his puppets attack us. The goal is to maneuver through the woods without getting lost and locate the Skull Kid by the sound of his horn so that we can attack him and end this running around. It's a pretty quick and painless mini boss fight ending in a small area. From here, our true path forward is revealed, and we see a Triforce logo on the ground in front of 2 stone guardians. Howling the Zelda's lullaby we just learned activates the guards and puts us to a test. A puzzle test. Now, this puzzle can give you the business on a blind playthrough, probably even on multiple playthroughs, but luckily I have the internet, so, you know, I know how to do the puzzle. I do remember that when I streamed this last year, this part took me forever because I refused to look anything up. It was hilarious. We all had a good time. Anyway, after getting the statues to align back in their original places, they open the gate to the Master Sword. Upon touching the sword, a massive white light comes forth, blowing away Midna and the cursed item that turned Link into a wolf. In a moment of awe and triumph, Link draws the sword, does a little bit of showing off, and takes it into his possession. Midna then takes that cursed item into her possession, allowing us to turn into a wolf whenever we want. Midna politely asks us to come with her to find the Mirror of Twilight to assist her in stopping Zan. She's actually pretty bashful now that we've been with her for so long and helped her from her lowest point. Well, next up is the third act of the game. We've come a long way from here. Things get a little bit quicker. Getting straight to it, we head to Telma's bar because she sent us a letter that her guests of the hour have arrived and would like us to formally meet them. We're introduced to the official super secret underground Hyrule B team, featuring Ashe, a character who looks straight out of a Xenoblade game, Chad, the geek, and dear old dad himself, Russell. We have one more member to meet on site down in Lake Hylia, but for the time being, the team describes themselves as the investigators of the weird and unusual events going on in Hyrule. 4 characters are related to accessing the next 4 dungeons. First up is Aru, the Arbiter's Ground in the abandoned Gerudo Desert. In true Zelda fashion, our means of travel are not ordinary, and because the man running a canon minigame down in Lake Hylia owes Aru a favor, we will now be arriving at our destination via canon. It's very ridiculous and normalized, I love it. Immediately upon touching down, Midna stops us and gives us a little lore dump to really explain the few shadows and the magic interlopers that were sealed away by the goddesses for attempting to steal the Triforce and the Mirror of Twilight. It is the history of her people as she is descended from them. I'm pretty sure this has been mentioned before, but hey, here we go again if you missed it. Basically, what had happened was everyone was chilling in the Twilight Realm until Zan appeared and started turning people into beasts and took the throne. We also learned that the goddesses, in their mercy, provided the protectors of Hyrule with the Mirror of Twilight to travel between the realms. Midna caresses Link's face and asks him once again, "Will you come with me, please?" "Of course, baby girl, let's go get it." The desert itself is pretty whelming. There are only really 3 landmarks here, no towns and no NPCs. Those being the missing chunk of the Elden Bridge, a Bulbin camp, and the Arbiter's Ground dungeon itself. Despite it being empty, I always enjoyed the mandatory section of going through the Bulbin camp. Here, stealth is encouraged, but not necessary. You can snipe all the enemies here for a one-shot knockout, go in guns blazing and slice them up with that new fancy sword, or do a combination of both. The most memorable part for me is yet another battle versus King Bulbin, and him burning down his entire base of operations because he's a sore loser and tried to burn us alive. This guy really just hates us. After fleeing the scene, we arrive directly at the entrance to Arbiter's Ground, once a prison for Hyrule, now an abandoned tomb. If y'all have ever seen the classic hit movie The Mummy, then this is exactly how it feels. It's just peak catacomb atmosphere. We've got sand, it's rough, it's coarse, and there's mold worms everywhere. Also, it turns out that all that sand within the dungeon is quicksand. Standing still for too long while trying to navigate platforms and puzzles will result in Link's traumatic demise. The gimmick of this dungeon is to fully utilize our new ability to turn into our wolf form at will in order to track down and battle 4 Poe who have stolen the flames of lanterns that would otherwise have led us directly to the end of the dungeon. Once all 4 have been defeated, we fight our mandatory dungeon mini-boss, the Death Sword. It has a pretty memorable introduction for being a mini-boss. It's surrounded by protective talisman to keep it sealed, so of course we cut the talisman and release the danger. It looks like a demonic Poe and has a huge sword. It's very on the nose. The fight is simple enough though. In wolf form, simply dodging its swings until it becomes tangible to attack does the trick. Then it will become visible and tangible to our regular form for us to shoot with an arrow, cut, spin, and slash into submission. Our reward is the dungeon's item, the spinner. It's a giant Beyblade that Link hops on to use in very specific wall rails and floor holes. Now, these very specific wall rails lead us to the boss key and grant us access to the boss room. Spinning is always a good trick, as they say. Once in the boss room, it's dark, quiet, and there's a giant skeleton in the middle of the room. I guess there is no boss, so we can head on out. Unless Dan teleports into the room, taunting and threatening as he usually does. Then he creates a sword out of magic to reanimate our nearly fossilized acquaintance. Its eye sockets begin to glow. It somehow roars with no lungs, and it's on and popping. This is the Stalord. In the first phase, you gotta use the spinner to gain speed from the wall rail and launch yourself towards the spine of the Stalord. After maneuvering through the fodder, the boss goes down about 3 hits. So, easy win, right? Like, after raising a platform to escape the pit, the undead becomes reanimated again. It's just a floating head now, and it shoots energy balls at us. Here, we must ride up this new platform, gaining speed, dodging energy balls, traps, and eventually jumping into the head itself to knock it down so we can get to work. Now that the Stalord is re-dead, as in dead again, not as in the enemy, we can now scale the outside of the grounds to the Mirror of Twilight. It's like the mirror is shattered. Only one piece remains on the pedestal, to Midna's shock and anger. She sits down on the ground, defeated, until the sages reveal themselves to tell us a story. It turns out that the mirror was shattered by dark magic possessed by none other than Ganondorf himself. So what had happened was, back in the day, Ganon was riding on down the lands, causing mayhem and destruction everywhere, but he was a fool. Sages caught him lacking, alright? They changed his ass up, they put him in the Arbiter's grounds, and they staged an execution. The only problem is that Ganondorf has been blessed by the Triforce, just like Zelda and Link have. So he said, "I can break these cuffs," and charged at the sage that stabbed him, killing him immediately. Ganon pulls the sword from his stomach, ready to rampage, but the sages quickly decide to open the Mirror of Twilight to send Ganondorf away, Phantom Zone style. They speculate that Zant has been gifted his powers by Ganondorf. Luckily for us, and because the plot demands it, only the true ruler of the Twilight Realm can destroy the mirror permanently. The sages let us know that shards can be found in the mountains, in ancient grove, and in the skies. We've got some work to do. Returning to the Telma's Bar Round Table, we learn that Shay has headed off to Zora's domain to investigate sightings of a Yeti coming down from the mountains. She's drawn up a picture of what it looks like, so it's up to us to gather some information from the Zora. I skipped straight to the head honcho, Prince Rallis, back in Kakariko Village because that's what you're supposed to do, and he accurately identifies it as a Yeti man that often comes down to Zora's domain to capture reek fish. It turns out that these fish are native to the area and a Yeti favorite. Besides this, Prince Rallis has resolved to continue on with his life without his dear mother and be the leader that the Zora need. Good job, buddy, I'm proud of you. He also gifts us with one of his coral earrings so that we can capture reek fish of our own and then gather the scent, track down the Yeti man. So, Scent and Snout were able to continue further into Snow Peak until we meet the Yeti himself, Yeto. He's a pretty chill dude and mentions that he got the fish to make a stew for his sickly wife. She hasn't been feeling too hot since Yeto gifted her a pretty mirror. After indulging in a snowboarding minigame down to the mountain, we enter the home of Yeto and his wife, Yetta. It just so happens that this place is also the dungeon, Snow Peak Ruins. Now, this is the draftiest home in existence. It's literally lightly snowing inside. The dungeon itself looks like an abandoned home, despite being very well lived in by the Yetis. Even the room where they seem to frequent, like the kitchen and the living area, are disheveled. It's not that big of a deal, I guess. I don't think Yeti standards and Hylian standards line up very well anyway. The overall challenge of this dungeon is to go where Yetta tells you to in order to find the mirror shard. Unfortunately, due to her sickness, she actually directs us towards various soup ingredients that Yeto aggressively slams out of our inventory and into his soup. At least we get to have some soup, I guess. The dungeon features ice puzzles, ice enemies, deep snow, and cannonballs. After some adventuring, we encounter the Dark Hammer mini-boss, who fights with a ball and chain. Jumping behind it and cutting its back up takes it down nice and easy. Then, we're able to claim this ball and chain for ourselves. It lets us break giant ice pillars, attack enemies, and knock blocks around much faster. With the ball and chain in hand, we're able to get to the bedroom key and meet Greta in her room to obtain the mirror shard. if this were a perfect world. It is not, however, and Greta is possessed by the dark desires from the influence of the mirror. She transforms and begins attacking us. This is the boss, Blizzetta. It's very eerie and loud. She encases herself in ice with ice pillars as her form of attacking. The first phase involves knocking her around with the ball and chain as she spins around the icy floor, going faster after each hit. After some bashing, the second phase begins and she takes to the skies to attempt to slam down into us. This phase we have to dodge her pillars, break them, and smack her around some more. It's no big deal, and she loses. Again. Her defeated scream is super creepy, but she'll be okay, I think. We got the second piece of the mirror, and we can get up out of here. But not before Yetta and Yeto have a nice loving husband and wife scene, where he comes to her rescue because we literally did beat her halfway to death. I guess love can bloom, even on a battlefield. The next stop is a revisit to the Sacred Grove. Here we meet up with Russell outside of the Forest Temple, where he mentions that an ancient Hylian temple is safeguarding a power of an ancient people. I don't think he's referring to the Master Sword because we already have that, but to the item that we will obtain from the next dungeon. Russell lends us his trusty golden cuckoo, and we glide off into the forest once again. It can never be as simple as that though, as we meet Skull Kid again and have to play hide and seek. This time around, it's a bit more difficult to play along with his game because of the maze-like nature of the woods. After finding him a couple of times, we face him and his puppets once again in battle before returning to the area where we did the puzzle to obtain the Master Sword. Here we have to return the Master Sword to its pedestal to basically inject some power back into the area, removing a guardian from in front of a new door we found. Looking through the door, everything is grayscale, signifying that what we're looking at is the past version of the Temple of Time. It's very similar to what can be seen in The Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time, and even plays a slightly newer version of the Temple of Time theme. This is a lot of tongue twisters, by the way. This is the past in all its glory. Truly. After placing the Master Sword back in its pedestal, a stairway of light appears and leads us into the dungeon area of the temple. We also meet up with Uku and her son, who are trying to finally find their way back home, and they think that the item in this dungeon can assist them in doing so. Aside from that, the main gimmicks of this dungeon are buttons, weights, and returning a statue back to its place at the entrance of the dungeon. The music feels like something that would play in a puzzle game, or something you'd hear on a quiz show during a tough question. It has some low dun 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 type sounds that bring you back to the reality of being in a dungeon though. It's a decent listen, but nothing that I would play out casually. The enemies consists of the usual crew of Keese, Lizalfos, and Helmasaurs, with some new enemies being Armos, Goma babies, and Blade Traps. The mini-boss here is Dark Nut, which has a pretty intense atmosphere around it, and the fight can be difficult if you don't learn the secret techniques like Shield Bash and the Helm Splitter. It's a decent fight overall, rewarding us with the Dominion Rod. It lets Link throw a little sphere at statues to bring them to life and mimic his movement. Conveniently, the statue that was missing at the entrance of the dungeon is in the mini-boss room. So now the goal is to guide it back, reversing all the puzzles and trick rooms we've been through, and utilizing bells to transport the statue through the doorways. It's pretty rewarding getting to basically blaze through the rooms that had tedious enemies or puzzles though. Once back in its place, a new path is open to us, and we're off to face the boss, Armo Goma, which is essentially the Goma boss fight, again from Ocarina of Time, but way cooler. Goma shoots a beam out of its eye, lays eggs, immediately spawning baby Goma to attack you, and crawls around the ceiling just being a spider. To beat the spider, we shoot its exposed eyeball, then take control of the giant statues in the room to bash Goma to death. Same is done for the second phase too. Goma just moves around a little bit faster. After its defeat, the large body vanishes, and the eyeball is revealed to be the true body of Goma. It runs around with his babies trying to get away from us, but I just shoot it with a bomb arrow so we can get on out of here. I ain't got time to be chasing people around. The third mirror shard has been obtained. We got all the dungeon goodies, and we only have one more left to go. Immediately exiting the dungeon, we are met with another trial. Our new Dominion Rod has lost its power and needs to be restored. Uku mentions that there is a spell that can restore its power, but she forgot. Oopsie. We also receive a letter from Renato about Ilia. Also, Chad is in Kakariko Village investigating a strange statue. Turns out, Ilya has remembered a few details about the events of her kidnapping, mentioning a wooden statue. While Shad investigates, we are encouraged to assist Ilya in the final steps of regaining her true self. We head over to Telma for some more info. Here, the crooked doctor that initially cared for Ilya seems to have taken the wooden statue for himself to pay off his enormous bar tab. But after sitting it outside to get the smell of spilled medicine off of it, it was stolen. The smell is away though. As Wolf Link, we learn the smell of the medicine in order to track down this statue. It turns out Kelma's cat, Luis, stole it. Then also lost it because she got jumped by some stowhounds south of the castle town. So we go handle these undead bad boys and obtain the wooden statue. When showing it to Ilya, she remembers a little bit more and says that the person that saved her is in danger. With the help of the Goron Patriarch and one of the elders, they identify it and say that it is from an hidden village, which once was the home of the Sheikah tribe. Darbus goes on ahead and clears the fallen boulders so that we can enter the village. Here, the town is overrun by 20 moblins, just chilling. We take it upon ourselves to hand out some street-level justice to a really fun Western-sounding tune. After going about sniping dudes off of towers, crashing through windows, and blowing stuff up, the village is cleared. An elderly woman named Impis, the last of her people, appears from hiding and recognizes Link as the hero of legend because of his clothes. Showing her the wooden statue reminds her of Ilya, who gave her a horse-calling charm to protect her, stating that Link would be there to save them eventually. Big shout out to the Ordon people because they are always gassing Link up to everyone they meet. Anyway, this horse call is the last piece of the puzzle, and showing it to Ilya restores her memory. In a heartfelt moment between Ilya and Link, they are reminded of the Ordon Spring where they spent a lot of time with each other. Ilya reassures Link that she will be fine and believes in us all the way in getting our mission complete. We still need to restore the rod's power and help out Shad. Luckily, Impasse hands over an ancient Sky People textbook once we show her the Dominion Rod. Showing this to Shad, he attempts to read out the contents of the book to no success. For him. It worked out perfectly for us because the rod's power has been restored. Defeated, dejected, sobbing, and in tears, Shad goes off to test out the words on the other statues in Hyrule. He shares their locations with us too. The next part of the quest is a bit of a runaround, but we just have to travel to the areas on the map, move the statues out of their place, and write down the ancient texts or letters that the statues were covering. Once all of them are collected, Shad reads from the completed book once again, and the seal of the statue is dissolved. Unfortunately for Shad, he is impatient and a quitter, so he wanders off while we move the statue with a rod, revealing a giant ancient cannon. He follows us to this cannon, and we politely tell him to go away so that Midna can teleport the broken tech to Lake Hylia so the resident cannon man can take a look at it. I don't know what qualifications this man has or how he can do it, but for just 300 rupees, he repairs the cannon over a quick building montage, showing that it takes him a couple of days to get us up and running. He says, "This thing has some kick to it. You might even reach the heavens." "Thanks, sir. That's entirely the plan." So we hookshot into the cannon and shoot ourselves up into the sky, along with two other last-minute passengers, Uku and her son. We're welcomed to the City of Sky by babbling Uka and a red-eyed black dragon flying overhead. The Uka run to take shelter in their nearby shop. Turns out that the ancient race of Sky People are doing pretty well, and there are a ton of them. Do them a favor and take care of this dragon issue since they helped us out throughout the game's dungeons, I guess. Alright, now hear me out. I have no idea how this is supposed to be pronounced. You know, the Oaka, the Uka. I don't know. So don't get mad at me, okay? I'm trying my best. Anyway, the city in the sky doubles as a home for the Uka, as well as a dungeon. It's not designed to be very homely, at least not by regular standards. They don't really have buildings besides the one shop, and there isn't anything slightly resembling that intelligent creatures live there. The Uka are just kind of scattered all over the place, defying gravity and just standing around staring at each other. To each their own, though. It's not at all run down. It's bright, above the clouds. Wind is its main gimmick, you know, the usual things you would expect when you're like thousands of feet in the sky. Throughout the dungeon, we have to utilize the hookshot, the spinner, and the iron boost to traverse through the windy areas and reach new heights. Surprisingly, there aren't really any new enemies here besides the Helmosaurus, the mini-boss, Aerophos, and the boss, Argarok. After stumbling around and defeating said mini-boss, we obtain the double claw shot. Now, I know I said this before, but I adore hook shots or whatever grapple type items in games. So making the final dungeon item a double claw shot is really cool to me. It lets us latch onto one wall and aim to go onto another. It's super useful and opens up the rest of the dungeon. The main thing it allows us to do is travel up higher, deactivate a giant fan to obtain the boss key, activate another giant fan, and traverse across a huge open area to get to the boss. The boss fight here is one of the most memorable in the game for me. The Argarok is a menacing armored dragon that uses fire as its main attack. At least, I think that's all it does. I've never really given it a chance to do anything else. The gimmick of this fight is that we must use the double claw shot to climb between 4 pillars until we reach the top. Then, to claw shot ourselves onto the dragon's tail, whip our boots, and drag it to the ground to break its armor. After doing this 3 times, the armor is destroyed and the battle becomes more erratic. The wind picks up, so if you aren't careful, you can be blown off the battleground. The same method applies for this phase though, the only difference being that you must now cling onto P-hats to dodge the dragon's flame, then cling to its back, bashing away at it until it plummets out of the sky. After 3 or 4 beatdowns, Argarok is defeated. Midna celebrates after we've successfully obtained all 4 pieces of the mirror shard. She gives another brief reminder of Xant's false kingship because he was not able to completely destroy the mirror, and hurries us to head back to Arbiter's grounds to rebuild the Mirror of Twilight. That's the end of that quest. This part of the game is a bit lighter on the story elements and mainly focuses on wrapping up all the loose ends created in the first 2 acts of the game. I don't think it's a bad thing though. I think it can be seen as a nice relief from all the information that we've been receiving. It's a great opportunity for the game to let the gameplay do the talking and catch up on item collection or mini games, whatever you want to do. Getting back into the story, upon arriving back in Arbiter's grounds, we waste no time restoring the Mirror of Twilight. It lights up and it's a black and white spiral that kind of looks like a kaleidoscope. It shines onto the massive rock in front of the mirror and opens up the portal to the Twilight Realm. Before entering, Midna gives us some more details about her home and how people were referring to it as the Dark Realm is disrespectful and makes it seem evil. She says it was actually serene and beautiful before Xant came through and ruined it all. During her monologuing, we're interrupted by the sages who take ownership over what has happened to the Twilight Realm because of their actions, finally acknowledging her as the Twilight Princess, to Midna's surprise. After this, we get a flashback of the sequence of events that led Midna to lose her true form during an attack from Xant. She's fleeing the scene, battered and bruised, until she pulls out a piece of the completed fused shadow that she has been regularly wearing. Staring at it, her distraught face quickly becomes maliciously creepy as she grins ear to ear at the sight of the helmet. She tells the sages and Link that her original plans were to just use Link to save the Twilight Realm and only the Twilight Realm, as she did not care at all for the World of Light. She was also seeking Link because it was prophesied that a beast would be the savior of the Twilight people. Ending her retelling of events, we finally journey into the portal. Here, Midna heartfully apologizes to Link and asks him once again to accompany her on this quest to save her people and redeem herself for fleeing when she was needed the most. The Palace of Twilight, despite the harm that's been caused to it, is calm. It's 3 separate islands floating in an endless dim sky. The architecture is foreign, yet looks futuristic. Each of the islands makes up the whole of the dungeon. Within its walls, we have dark clouds that trigger Link's wolf transformations, puzzles that require us to transfer balls of light, and plenty of opportunities to use our new double claw shot. Its layout is simple and reminiscent of the first 3 dungeons' designs. The main comparison being that it's more straightforward, quick to complete, small, and used to move the plot forward. The enemies consist of our usual Twilight-based enemies, Shadow Beasts, Keese, Vermin, Baba Serpents, Kargaroks, and it features 2 new enemies, the Xant Mask and Xant's Hand. Xant's Mask shoots balls of darkness at us while teleporting away. The hand chases us throughout the dungeon once we secure the ball of light that we need to transport back to the entrance of the palace. It's pretty exciting having to figure out the light puzzles quick enough before the hand attacks and takes the ball from us. Its attacks can be delayed though, by shooting it with arrows or even the claw shot. Once both orbs from the 2 orbiting islands are obtained, the Master Sword is infused with pure light power. This lets a swipe of the sword move the dark clouds out of the way, allowing us to travel through a massive waterfall of clouds to proceed to the final section of the dungeon. Also, it makes the Master Sword even more powerful and lets us defeat most Twilight enemies in a single hit. This game does an amazing job of making you progressively more powerful, be it with your sword or with your equipment. This final area consists of more of the same light-based puzzles and platforming. To put it simply, it's a mini tower climb featuring a couple of enemy gauntlet sections. I definitely fell a lot while recording this and I'm not bitter at all. So after finally arriving at the top of the dungeon, we are face to face with Zant for our last encounter. It turns out Zant isn't as put together as we thought. While monologuing, he repeals his mask and gives glorious speech on how Midna should join him and forget about the World of Light, who have caused the Twilight so much harm. Again. He then starts to show his true nature, a crybaby, and he starts spinning and jumping around the room. He leans all the way back, like an obtuse angle, then retells the events of how he came into the power of Ganondorf. You see, during his very toddler-like pounding on the ground and screaming, he was visited by a massive orb of darkness that envelops his entire body. Inside it, Ganondorf reveals himself to Zant, saying that I shall store my power inside of you. I doubt Zant had much of a choice, but he embraces Ganondorf's power and refers to him as God. He regains his composure, stating that he will combine light and twilight to make darkness, and initiates the boss battle. This is one of the more fun bosses in the game for me because it literally takes elements from a majority of the mini bosses and bosses as Zant mimics their environments and movesets as we beat down on them. As the fight goes on, Zant starts to lose his mind more and more. As long as you remember how to beat all the game's bosses, this fight won't be an issue whatsoever. Once on his last legs, it's just Zant versus us in the back of Hyrule Castle Town, or an area that looks like it. We're still in the realm of Twilight. Zant uses two sword-like weapons to slash, spin, and jump at us while he attempts to knock us back into the electrified barrier that he placed around the battlefield. The basic attacks work just fine here, and those golden wolf skills especially come in handy. After his defeat, Zant throws yet another tantrum before falling to his knees, arms raised, until he collapses. Midna regains the completed few shadows from Zant and is in awe of the raw power she has obtained. However, this did not break her curse and restore her true form. From his stolen throne, Zant calls Midna a traitor once again and teases her about not being able to fix what is broken while referring to her form. He claims that Ganondorf's power is all-powerful and that her own powers will never return. Of course, this makes hot-headed Midna even more angry. After hearing enough of his nonsense, she attacks him with tendrils made of her hair, completely obliterating Zant, to her and Link's horror. Midna, fearful yet grateful for having access to her ancestors' power again, calms down and creates the portal to get us up out of here. Midna believes that we can restore Princess Zelda now, but regardless, we need to go to Hyrule Castle because the barrier is still up and Hyrule is still in need of saving. Move out of the way, heroes coming through. We bum rush to the castle and Midna puts on her brand new fused shadow helmet that then proceeds to thrash her around, knocking her into the columns and off into the distance. However, she comes back in this giant, monstrous form that has 6 massive arm legs with hands at the end. The majority of her body is covered in the glowing designs that we've come to associate with the Twilight people. It's beastly and not Midna at all, but still, it's very cool. Sometimes I've even considered that maybe the beast that was prophesied to save the Twilight was actually just her the whole time. The story up to this point doesn't really support that though. The literal spirits straight up told us that Link is the destined hero of both worlds. I digress. She creates a spear and shatters the geometric barrier of darkness covering the entirety of the castle in a show of pure strength and magical prowess. Exhausted, she returns back to her regular imp form, being cradled in Link's arms. Anyway, the duo continue forward and we enter the Hyrule Castle garden. The camera doesn't sprawl over the entire area, so it gives us a chance to take a look around for ourselves. The castle is a massive fortress. There is no music playing within the garden. All we hear is the rain falling, and the bright sky adds to the intensity of the atmosphere. This is the final dungeon. The castle is split into 3 parts, mirroring that of the Palace of Twilight. We have 2 separate wings to the east and west, then a final building area that we must scale. The outer areas have us running gauntlets with bokoblins that are super tanky, but still easy enough to defeat. Outside, we also face off against King Bulbin for the final time. In this final duel, it's extremely similar to when we fought him back in Arbiter's Grounds. After defeating him, he surrenders before any more harm can be done, and gives us a small key that we need to proceed. Before he flees, he talks to Link, saying, "I follow the strongest side. That is all I have ever known." The dynamic duo look on as he leaves, and all Midna can say is, "He spoke." What a character, growing from instigating the entire events of the story that got Link involved in this conflict to apologizing for his actions in his own confused and simple way. This also means that King Bulbin recognizes Link as being the strongest side, as he is no longer willing to go against him. There are various puzzles involving using our boomerang, sniping enemies off towers, our lantern, following the guidance of the fallen soldiers, and we even get a guest appearance from our buddies from Telma's bar as they help us with defeating some enemies so that we can enter the castle further. Overall, some might see this final area as a jump in difficulty, rightfully so. One of my favorite puzzles, for example, there are two paths within the dungeon that lead to the same area, but they have different puzzles. One, you can shoot down the strings holding up paintings to reveal switches that open the door. The other is a puzzle with lighting torches. I actually still can't figure out the torch one to save my life, so I just ruined the paintings instead. Continuing on from here, we have to fight several dark nuts and use our spinner to scale the walls leading up to the boss room. This is it. The massive lock spins and falls to the ground like it always does, but we don't immediately see our foe. Only an ominous panning out to the peak of the castle, leading into the room filled with dark fog, preventing us from seeing anything in front of us. The fog clears as we go further. The statues have been desecrated and lay shattered on the ground. We then fix our sights on Princess Zelda, who has been suspended within a statue of the Triforce. Lowering our eyes, directly below the princess, is Ganondorf, the King of Darkness, welcoming us to his castle. He slowly stands up. His wound from the stage sword attack is still present, and he somehow has managed to hold onto the sword that has caused this mortal wound. Midna and Ganondorf have an intense back and forth regarding how he has seen her people as only a means to an end, using their hatred for the world of light as his literal fuel to be reawakened, given physical form again. He gloats how he is one of the chosen wielders of the Triforce and means to take it all for himself, starting with Zelda. Midna makes a rush to save the princess, but Ganon is faster. He used a similar teleportation technique to the one we've been using for our entire journey, but he rematerializes himself within Zelda, making her his puppet. Midna is blown away from the throne room and is prevented from assisting due to Ganon's barrier magic keeping her out. It's up to us to defeat Ganondorf's puppets, Princess Zelda. This boss fight involves the most intense match of tennis you've ever seen. Light and darkness combined to make Twilight, going against our Hero of Light. The main way of doing damage here is just to perfectly continue to knock back the orbs that Ganon is shooting at us until Zelda's body has finally had enough. Ganondorf temporarily loses strength and the barrier is removed. Midna equips her Fuse Shadow, aggressively snatching up the possessed Zelda, and purifies her of Ganondorf's control. Thinking themselves triumphant, we get the iconic shot of Link and Midna grinning at each other. This is short-lived, however, because Ganondorf re-emerges as Dark Beast Ganon. He's a fierce hog-like creature that rocks a red-haired mane, still has some grossly human hands and feet, and his wound has grown larger, brighter, and is dripping with what is most likely blood. We'll take full advantage of his literal glaring weakness, though. The fight goes like this. Ganondorf will teleport away and attempt to fake us out by creating multiple portals that he could possibly be charging through. The real portal sticks out because it will turn completely blue before he appears. Here, we must use our wolf form so that we can work with Midna to grab him by the head and toss him to his side so that we can latch onto his wound and deal some critical damage. Each time we hit him, the fight's pace increases until Ganon collapses in pain and begins burning away. While the heroes look on, Midna begins to glow. It's Zelda's essence leaving her body and returning to her own. Midna is speechless, and of course, so is Link. Zelda reassures Midna that she does not need to say anything, as they were one from the point Zelda sacrificed herself until now. This heart-to-heart is ruined by Ganondorf returning to his giant, fiery, floating head form. Midna faces him with determination, donning her helmet, transforming and attempting to stab Ganondorf with her Spear of Twilight. Before we can see what happens, Midna teleports Zelda and Link out to Hyrule Field. The two look back at the castle as it goes up in smoke. In front of this smoke, Ganondorf reappears on his dark steed, victoriously holding up the Fuse Shadow before destroying it to taunt our heroes. He charges at Zelda and Link full force with his battalion of wraiths. Zelda prays to the spirits to come to the aid of herself and Link during their time of need. She requests Link's power combined with her blessed light arrows to help defeat Ganondorf once and for all. Now, this fight is definitely the most cinematic of the 4 total fights versus Ganondorf that we go through. We ride upon opponent's back with Zelda accompanying us. The goal is to chase behind Ganon and hold the position so that the princess can light him up with her arrows. Once he's hit, we're free to wail on him. It can be pretty difficult to get the hang of it because this is very different from our previous battles on horseback. Eventually, Ganon will fall from his horse. He quickly gets back to his feet, laughing the whole time before finally drawing the blade that was meant to finish him. He creates another barrier, locking himself and Link into a ring for their true final duel. I love this fight the most out of any humanoid enemy in the game. Ganondorf is truly a match for Link. The both of us throw out our best techniques, jumps, slashes, spins, and I even throw in a fishing rod to throw him off his game. This fight is fairly simple. The main goal is to create an opening to continuously attack Ganondorf. After his beatdown, we manage to knock him flat on his back and drive the Master Sword straight through his wounded abdomen for the killing blow. He lets out a lengthy death scream. He rises back to his feet, gasping for air, staring off into the distance. We see an image of Zant, which I believe is what Ganon is seeing, and Zant quickly leans his head to the side to signify the death of Ganondorf. Passed on from this realm, still standing tall. After this, the 4 spring spirits appear and it seems like they've saved Midna. Link runs to his companion, but when he arrives, it's not a form that he's familiar with. The defeat of Ganondorf has erased the effects of his dark magic from her body. This is Midna's true form. As always, she teases Link, stating, "What? Am I too beautiful for words?" Yes, she is. Let's roll the credits. We're treated to a triumphant mashup of the main Zelda title theme and some music from places like Ordon Village, Hyrule Castle Town, and various areas from Overall. Throughout the credits, we see a couple of stories coming to their ends. The young Zora Prince is back at his domain, leading his people. The Telma Bar crew are adventuring together. The children of Ordon Village have returned home, and Midna is returning home too. We pan through the Arbiter's ground, eventually viewing the 3 heroes around the Mirror of Twilight. Apathetically, Midna says that she guesses this is farewell and that she supposes light and shadow cannot mix. Zelda rebuttals, stating that the two are a part of the same coin and that she believes we cannot exist without one another. She believes this was destined to be, otherwise the mirror would not have been left for them. Midna lifts up her head, stating that Zelda's words are kind and true. She happily states that if all of Hyrule could be like her, then they'd do just alright. Midna walks over to the stairs leading back to her home. She turns back, with a single tear leaving the corner of her eye. She starts to say, "Link, before interjecting and saying, "See you later." She pushes her tear into the mirror, causing it to begin to shatter, and returns back to the realm of Twilight, never to be able to return to the world of light. The credits continue on with a more somber tune that slowly returns to a triumphant one, as Link returns home to his village to rest after a long, hard-fought journey. Now, this is one of those game endings that always gets to me and gets me a little emotional. The concept of losing a companion you've been with through a good time, bad times, and all the adventures in between to save the world or otherwise so that you both can create a future for yourselves in it, but not to be able to see each other's lives and futures to their end is a great emotional point to conclude the story. Midna hasn't stopped living, but for Link, and I guess reversely for Midna, they functionally stopped existing in their worlds. This is the only downside of Midna and Link's adventure though. Overall, they've come out on top, learned more about themselves, and have been able to help out their other loved ones. I like to think that they also take comfort in the fact that they were there for each other and with each other for as long as they were. Now that we've finished our journey, I do want to take some time to just summarize everything that I like and love about this game. I know I've talked on pretty much everything in this game as we go, but let me talk to you one more time. This is my favorite Zelda game overall. This is the pinnacle of the traditional Zelda formula for me. It makes a lot of callbacks to its spiritual prequel, Ocarina of Time, but it only adds to the experience for me. Even without any prior knowledge, this is still a fun, heartfelt, and replayable story. The game has aged beautifully graphically, the music is timeless, and the story is simple but fleshed out by the world and the side characters that live in it. It's filled with side content, mini games, and it's always fun collecting all the heart pieces and whole souls for maximum health. Now, to take a step back out of my love and devotion for this game and be objective, I do recognize that it does have its flaws. One of the major issues can be the pacing of the game. I know earlier I talked about how I enjoyed the lengthy opening act of the game, as it establishes a lot of elements that are built on throughout the remainder of it. On replays, or if you're impatient, this can be a massive drag. It can also be a bit tedious going back and forth with characters for their mandatory side quests to move on to the next dungeon. Again, I can appreciate it, but it can slow down the experience for some. So now here we are at the end of the video. I'm just going to reiterate one more time. You guys know how it goes. This is one of my favorite journeys that I take comfort in at various points in my life. It's truly timeless. I can never not say that enough. I spent the past 3 months replaying, writing, recording, and editing this project while constantly pushing back the release. Total, I spent about 26 hours on this current playthrough, which is almost half the time I spent when I played it during my Road to the Kingdom event in 2023. I was on a mission this time. Then, as far as writing and editing and recording, I throw another maybe 15 hours on top of that. This has really been a true labor of love, and I really wanted to give this project my all, not just for the respect of the game, but for myself. So thank you for taking the time to watch and listen to me today. And if you've enjoyed yourself, please interact with the video by sharing, liking, subscribing, and you can also check me out on twitch.tv for live streams that happen every week. And you can also support me financially on Patreon. So as we depart for the day, once again, this is a must-play video game, and I hope that I've helped you feel even a fraction of how this game makes me feel. This is one of my favorite video games of all time, and this has been my time with The Legend of Zelda: Twilight Princess.